You mentioned recently that you follow a plant-based diet regimen about 80% of the time. Can you please provide some examples of vegan foods and snacks that you eat on a regular basis? Oh, that's cool. Okay, so first of all, just for those who know, a plant-based diet is keeping vegan most of the time. So there's a little bit of difference there, but 80%, 85% of meals kept in a vegan mode, and then something animal based can be in there. Now, of course, a person who is vegan is of course a plant-based diet, doing it to the next level. And so the general idea is the same there though, but it is felt that a plant-based diet can one of the main reasons why people do this is lowering inflammation. Now, in terms of some of the snack foods that I like to have, one of the things that we do try to avoid, that I do try to avoid, are processed foods, and processed grains, etc. I do allow grains in my diet. Probably my preferred crunchy snack food would be like an organic tortilla chips, corn. My body does not have a problem with corn since I got my vitamin D level rectified many years ago, and I used to have terrible allergic reactions to corn. But that's definitely my favorite crunchy snacky food, and salty food. I do like to slice up peppers, different peppers. I'm not a huge green pepper fan. I know some people do, but I do like yellow peppers and red peppers, and what I will do, and orange peppers. I love those too. And I also slice them up, and I'll do different hummuses. There's so many different varieties of hummus out there. I've gotten recently into the carrot sriracha hummus that's out there, but all the different types of out there, kind of making it a little bit interesting. That's certainly very nice. I do like to do nuts and seeds in my diet as well, um, and dark chocolate. Dark chocolate definitely up there. I typically use dairy-free versions that are out there. The higher the cacao, the lower the sugar content in there. So I try to get at least, well, I do at least 60% cacao. Sometimes I'll go into a 70, 72%. With that, a lot of these also have these higher cacao products also have some fiber to them too. So you kind of get a little extra fiber out of them as well. Another one of the there's a product that I've liked. It's called Catalina Crunch. It's a brand, and they do make these keto based cereals that very nice and clean. Pardon me. Let me turn that off. Didn't mean to have my phone on there. So sorry if I blew you out of there. So that's something that I'll do, and I like to snack it with putting some berries on top, to using some almond milk or cashew milk as the white milky substance. That's one of my favorite snacks as well. I also like snacking on nut butters. Of course, the lower the sugar, the less processed, the better. So that's kind of like the foods that I like to eat on my diet. In addition to to following a primary plant-based diet, do you also limit or avoid gluten? And can you please share your medical advice on the effects of gluten in people prone to inflammation? Okay, so I do not consume a lot of gluten in my diet on a daily basis. I don't. There may be something once a week, or like I was at the ball game, and I did have a little bit of a soft pretzel there, just because it looked good and I wanted it. We were kind of doing something a little different, but I don't have a lot of gluten in my diet. I do eat some plant-based foods that have gluten in it. So for some of the meats alternatives, as you may know, it is kind of tough to do a meat alternative that doesn't have soy or gluten in it. I don't do that much of it, but that's certainly probably the areas that I will get it. But I'm also one who doesn't have a problem with gluten, and that's of course a very important aspect of things. There is no such thing as a perfect diet. Okay, if you tried to follow every single diet that's out there, you'd probably be stuck with water as your sole sustenance. And so, we all hear about these great diets. There's the keto diet, there's the anti-inflammatory diets, Mediterranean diets, etc. And it's a matter of there's some trial and error involved. Now, because of the fact that my body doesn't react to gluten, I don't have any GI issues from it. I don't get any allergy types of symptoms. I don't get any depression or mental health, or any more than my baseline ADD symptoms that I have. But of course, for everybody, it's going to be different. So if a person is consuming gluten and they're having a negative reaction from it, that's important. Doing an elimination diet, which we encourage people to remove all of the potentially allergenic food, pardon me, and then bring them back one at a time. to see if there's a negative reaction. That is a document that we have in our Patreon account. For those who are members of our Patreon, we have the details of our elimination reintroduction diet there as well. So that's kind of how I approach it from that. Now, gluten as well as casein, which is the cow milk protein, both can in certain people induce hyperinflammatory and autoimmune reactions. The quintessential one for gluten seems to be with Hashimoto's, the autoimmune thyroiditis. Gluten certainly seems to make those worse. One of the things that we have found in some of our children on the autism spectrum, as well as people with epilepsy, are the presence of cerebral folate receptor autoantibodies. This is a test that we can do. When people have this issue, they need to take significantly higher levels intake of activated folate to get it into the brain if the receptor is clogged up. But casein protein in particular does seem to make that worse. Now, I know you'll hear about other types of like milks. Like a lot of people talk about how camel milk is actually have anti-inflammatory properties, but it does have mammal casein in it, so that can be a little bit confusing and a little bit of a trial and error. So, in terms of inflammation, overall health, and longevity, can you please explain any differences in following a plant based diet versus a dairy free and gluten free diet that allows for things like meat and eggs? Which plan would you recommend for someone that has autoimmune concerns? Okay, well, we're getting some good diet questions here. So, first, I won't talk about longevity. I don't think any of these diets have been around long enough where we could talk about expanding lifespan here. And obviously, in the pediatric world, I would be dealing with many more people on the earlier side of life as opposed to the end of life. So I'm not going to talk specifically about longevity. Okay, but in terms of inflammation, and one of the things that we talk about sometimes is what's called an anti-inflammatory diet. And there are actually different versions of this. I think that the most simple as well as the most studied is the Mediterranean diet. Okay. So, but there are certain foods that promote inflammation, and that would include refined carbohydrates. So processed, flours, white breads, pastries, those types of things. Fried foods, okay, even if they're vegan foods like French fries, they're still fried foods, and fried foods do have pro-inflammatory components to it. High sugary foods, sodas. We now are learning more about how dietary sodas may not be any better and may actually cause other problems for people. So, certainly people do seltzer waters and flavored seltzer waters and stuff like that. That's different than a sugary sweetened or a artificially sweetened drink. Red meats themselves, burgers, steaks, etc., mammals, and especially processed meat like hot dogs and sausages and some deli types of meats can be problems. And then also saturated fat types of oil, so margarines, shortenings, and lard. Those are all foods that promote increased inflammation. Then there are other foods that have anti-inflammatory effects, things like tomatoes, olive oil, and other omega-9 foods. So for some people, omega-6s, like such as in nuts and seeds, can be a problem. So one of the things that we do on our genetic methylation and nutritional genetic testing that we do is we look, because some people actually can create increased inflammation from omega-6 fatty acids. So that's one of the reasons, among many, why I like to do this max function test for maximized genetics, because it will tell us if a person's more likely to convert omega-6 fatty acids into pro-inflammatory cytokines, interleukins, etc. If you don't have that issue, then omega-6s are going to be fine, and obviously that's a nice source. I do kind of think of nuts for a lot of people as a kind of like a superfood, because you do have some carbs in there, but it's not refined. You do have your proteins in there, you have your fats in there, healthy fats, so it's kind of a nice little superfood there. Now, fatty fish, things like sardines, salmon, those can be very helpful because they can be very nice in terms of the omega-3 fatty acids, which we know are also anti-inflammatory. Certain types of fruits, a lot of the berries, cherries, oranges, things that are high in vitamin C, things that are high in bioflavonoids, those are going to be very, very helpful. Now, if one wants to try to put this together, and you've probably heard of what's called the Mediterranean diet. Well, I mentioned it a few minutes ago, so you heard it there. But a Mediterranean diet, it kind of incorporates all of that. So if you're kind of looking for something, this is probably the thing that's been most studied. I know that Harvard University's med school talks about this a lot. So that would be kind of a good basic idea as what to follow. But at the same time, there could be lots of other foods. As I mentioned, doing an elimination diet may be necessary. Some people may not be able to handle whole grains, may not be able to handle legumes. So really, talking to a healthcare provider, trying to sort this thing out, trial and error, doing something for a few weeks doesn't make a difference, if not moving on. In general, that's kind of the way when I counsel my patients, the way we kind of look at this whole thing. Okay. And again, when it comes to legumes, when it comes to grains, it really just depends on the individual. Not everybody is going to promote inflammation. It's not always pro-inflammatory for people.
If you like this video, please see the description below and click the link for the full episode. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel and join us on social media.